Welcome to the Moksa Workflow Manager webinar. Today I'm going to show you a little bit what the new features of Workflow Manager have to offer you. Workflow Manager is a workflow tool that is completely integrated in Canto Cumulus. As you well know is that nowadays customers have the ability to easily create pictures, documents themselves. And when they do that, they very often put them just anywhere. So this is where Canto Cumulus comes in very handy, offering you the ability to work single source. Not only single source your assets, but also organize them and manage them. Manage them from the Cumulus client application, share and manage them from the web client, and publish and distribute it by sites. The key thing in a good digital asset management system is to limit the number of errors that can be made in the process. And one way of doing that is with backend automation. Canto Cumulus offers the Cumulus scheduler and Canto RoboFlow to automate the ingestion of assets, the export to other systems, the automatic ingestion of metadata, automatic naming conventions, all that kind of stuff can be pre-processed, automatically processed in the backend. But the key thing to a good digital asset management system is business process management. The interactions between users are very, very important, and you can use Cumulus as just an archive, but as soon as you want to use it in your production environment, it becomes very important to have a good way of managing those processes, the interactions between users. And this is where Moksa's Workflow Manager comes in. For the customer, this business process management offers them the opportunity to reduce the total cost of ownership and have a much better return on investment. Of course, they control much better what the users do with the assets and when they do it. The first step is that a partner can go to the customer and analyze how they work. These processes are then turned into what we call workflow templates. You can add as many workflow templates as you like, and with these workflow templates, new processes, new workflows can be started, as many instances as you like. In those workflow templates, you define the users, the swim lanes, the roles, and the individual tasks. And this is done with the workflow builder inside the Cumulus client. When you are creating these different tasks, and there will be rules, permissions, roles potentially involved. Well, all that, of course, is standard Cumulus functionality, for which, again, we think this is a perfect match. The starting of a new process, a new workflow, is completely integrated in sites, so the user doesn't have to learn a new interface. They simply go to the sites environment, log in, and if they have the permission to log in, they have here at the top of the screen the ability to click on the workflow portal. And automatically the workflows that they have access to show up so from this start point they can kick off any number of workflows. As I said, completely integrated in sites. Behind the scenes, there is a scheduler task running the Workflow Manager processes. That way, the backend is completely integrated into Cumulus server and Cumulus scheduler, and will send out email notifications to the different users and verifying if the different participants perform their tasks correctly and on time. The most important tasks in a workflow are commission tasks and approval tasks. A commission task is a task where a user gets an email and is asked to deliver files to the workflow. Maybe create a new design, or upload files from a shoot, or upload a copywriting document. All those things can be a commission task. An approval task, on the other hand, is again a user getting an email, and when they click on it, they open the interface in which they get some records to view, to check, to verify, and then to choose if they approve or reject them. And again, as you can see in the layout, it's integrated into Canto sites, into Cumulus sites. But managing business processes is actually the key element of this product. A manager, a person who's responsible, has to have the ability at any time to track what the status is of the different tasks. At what stage is a certain design project? At what stage are we waiting for a photographer? Or is the text, the copywriter still not ready with the text that we asked him to write? All those things can be monitored inside the Workflow Reporter. The Workflow Reporter is integrated in the Cumulus Web Server console and allows you to very quickly get an overview of the tasks. You will see a little bit further down in the presentation what other functionalities it offers. What flavors does a Workflow Manager have? Well, that depends on the fact if you have roles available in your Cumulus. If you have the roles and permissions module, or if you're running an enterprise, then if you have those one of those two, then you have no choice but to go for the Workflow Manager Enterprise, because when you're working with roles, you can get the highest revenue return on investment on the functionalities of Workflow Manager. However, for the workgroup environment, where there are usually less users in the process, where there are less users that need to be selected from, then in that case you can also go for a Workflow Manager workgroup. The difference in price is 50%. There is no functionality difference, only a price difference. But we identified the problem that for some customers, they needed a few basic workflows or just one workflow solution, and for them it was not so useful to have a complete workflow manager where they could manage it themselves. So we came up with the idea of having a Workflow Manager solution, which can work with roles and users, but does not have the workflow builder. So the customer cannot change their workflows themselves. The workflows are created and managed by Moksa. A reseller can, of course, still sell these workflows to the customer, from which he then benefits. What's new in this Cumulus 9 version, Workflow Manager 9 version? Well, there are actually more than 50 new functionalities. Let's start with the Workflow Portal. We refined the portal window. We actually improved the user experience, and we added a lot of new functionalities. Here are a few of them demonstrated with some screenshots. Here's the example in the Cumulus client where you can select and create, build the workflows. Well, on one of these workflows, we added a subcategory with a role name, design. So you can refine your individual workflows and make sure that some people can see them and other people cannot. In doing so, you will see that if the user logs in, and he goes to the workflow portal, that in that case, for instance here, he does not see workflow number 2, just because he is not part of the design department, of the design role. So that's how you can filter workflows. When you select, for instance here, workflow number 3, you come into the standard workflow configuration. This workflow configuration screen is completely configurable. You have the ability to have, for instance, a button where you can have a screenshot of your workflow, how it's built, or you can put whatever other screenshot in there that is useful for the person who kicks off the workflow. You can set a start date, and then of course the next part is input records. In the input records now in the new version, you also have the ability to have a multi-file upload. If you check here on this collection basket, it will automatically import the records from the collection basket. The next part are the participants. In this version, you have the ability to have auto selection. I did not select anything yet, and still there is already a user selected. There's already an admin selected, so you can configure this to happen or keep it as a standard functionality, not to select anything. In the workflow information, or also called additional info fields, you can add any number of fields that are specific for this workflow. It can help you force the user to add additional information like a SKU, or maybe a project name, or in this case, for instance, a plant. And the fields can be mandatory or not. They can be drop-down lists. So you have several possibilities of creating these lists. The most important part, however, in this window are the instructions. In your template, per task, you give a generic description of what is expected from the user. But this part of the workflow configuration, the instructions, allow you to add text for the user that is visible in every task, and that is specific for this workflow. You can also additionally add additional files that are not input records, so do not need to be processed by the workflow, but are available in every task of the workflow. That could be useful, for instance, for a style guide. And you notice here too, you have now the multi-file upload. If you submit, you get an overview of what you have entered, so to be sure that you are kicking off the right stuff. And on top of that, it verifies if some things were mandatory, like selecting the roles, like maybe some of the workflow information. If you forgot to set them, you will get a pop-up that notifies you of something that might be missing, and you will not be able to move to this screen. If I submit, it saves the workflow to the backend, and the backend will start this workflow as soon as it is due. Before going to the next task, let me first here show you a quick personalization of that same configuration screen. Notice that you don't have workflow details, you don't have for instance, the instructions. This is an example of how you could force a user to only have input records coming automatically from the collection basket. The user was not allowed to select them. They went right from the collection basket into the task. The user can delete them individually, if that is an option, and the user can add here some comments. Comments could be maybe explaining what they wanted to use it for. So it could be an order request form, something like that. It could be a form saying, here you have to tell me why you want to use these individual images. And then further down the workflow, it could be verified and approved. Or it could be a briefing tool where you say, please use this picture on the cover, use that one on the back end, please crop this, so only take the left side of the picture, etc., etc. So there are many possibilities by fine-tuning these interfaces to make it as simple as possible for the user. What is new for the workflow tasks? Well, there are a lot of new tasks. There are new functionalities for the approval and the commission task, and there are also other new functionalities like a Cumulus client link, a link allowing you to click on in the mail and get access to a collection basket right inside your Cumulus client. By default, it will give you a link that points to sites. Let's have a look. A task always starts with somebody getting an email, so the first participant gets an email. The text in the mail is, as you know, completely configurable, so whatever is in here can be static information or dynamic text added from elements of the task. For instance, here, create new flyer, use style guide, is what the user typed in when he kicked off this particular task. The most important part of this mail is, of course, this link. By clicking on this link, it will bring you right inside the workflow task. This is the basic view of the workflow approval task, commission task. You can see here it's a commission task, and it gives you generic information and some information about how many files you can provide, and it gives you the additional instructions and even additional files that might have been accompanying this workflow will be available for you to download. But as you can see, you only have the ability here to upload a file, to add a file, and to submit, to say that you are ready. In fact, you also have the ability to fine-tune this task so that instead of going right into the task, you have to have a login screen. Before you can log in, before you can get in, you have to log in just to verify if it's the right user that is clicking on this link. That could be one reason. A second reason could be that you are not sending this to one person, but to a pool of people that could perform this task, and the first person that takes the task will get control. The next person who would try to get in would just get a message that it's not available anymore. So when the user logs in, he gets exactly the same screen as you could see before, but in this example I personalized it that he has some extra functionalities. In the previous version he could only upload. Now he can also search in sites. That means that it could be that the file that he has to provide is already somewhere in another Cumulus sites catalog, and that he will bring in that particular file into this workflow. There is also here edit enabled. That means that you can edit the metadata of a record or even a bulk edit. It's based on a metadata template, so you can edit text fields or drop-down fields, string list fields, right from inside this task. Notice that there's also a bin next to this task, next to this document now, because for this user we enabled that he's allowed to delete this file. There could even be here an upload file that he's allowed to add additional instruction files. And in the workflow info, now there's a pencil here allowing the user to edit the workflow info data. So all this can be configured and flexibly changed for the benefits of each task. In this example, I'm simply going to upload a file. As you can see, once again, I can do single upload or multi-file upload. Remember, the multi-file upload is available for HTML browsers that support HTML5. Once I've selected the file and uploaded, I did here a single file upload. It automatically adds it to the workflow, and you can see it right away that it is a new file uploaded into the workflow. And you can delete the uploaded file from the workflow. So if by accident you chose the wrong file, it can always be deleted again, removed again. Finally, I'm submitting. The backend will check if everything is fine, and if everything is fine, it will log out. So my task is done at this point. The backend verifies now what's the next task, and the next person in line gets an email. The next email goes to Martin, and Martin gets a mail explaining what is expected from him. This is a very basic mail, as explained before. You can add a lot of text here. The most important part is again the link. So when you click on the link, you will notice that it will automatically bring you into the task. Optionally, again, with a login or not. In this task, you can see now that I don't have the ability to delete. I don't have the ability to edit. But there is something new in this task. Suddenly there's something in the workflow collection. Actually, across the whole workflow, there is a collection basket. And in that collection basket, you can, in the different steps, tasks in the workflow, add files to it from inside the workflow, or a user can just simply upload a file in a workflow. So it's a kind of basket that keeps the files together that are not used for approving and that are not instruction files, but for instance, this was the picture that was sent to the user for using in the design. So it is kept apart from the workflow, but still inside the workflow for viewing or to do other stuff with it. Finally, we are going to do an approval. So I can approve in this example. I can type optionally some text, and when I save, it will automatically store that information in the task. So when I'm finished now, all that I have to do is click on submit. Again, it will check if I did everything that was requested from me, and it will then automatically log out. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it is very important in a workflow environment, in a business process management environment, that you are able to manage and get overviews of statuses of tasks. Well, all this was built into the workflow reporter, and here too we added some new functionalities. We improved the interface and we refined the access permissions. Let's have a look. As I mentioned before, the workflow reporter is integrated in the Cumulus web server console. So the user logs in, and depending on his permissions, he has access or not, and depending on what type of permissions he has, he is actually an administrator and sees more, could see more than a basic user would see. If you click here on one of these filters, it will give you a partial view on the workflows. In this case, it's, for instance, my tasks pending, the to-do list or dashboard for this person. Bill has to perform a task in these workflows. So he has the ability to click on the open task mail. So instead of waiting for the mail to come in, instead of going into his mailbox, he can just also simply go into the web server console, into the workflow reporter and see what tasks he has to perform. He chooses a task and then clicks on the button. And in this case, it tells him exactly what is in the mail. The complete mail text is here available, and you can click simply on this link to get right into the task. So you don't have to use your mail at all. You also have the ability to go directly to the current task. If you want to know something more about the task, you can click on that button and you can see all the information about the task, when it was started, and also very important here, who are the participants. A task can have one person to perform the task, but it could also be several people having to perform that task. So in that case, you would see which ones have already performed that task and which ones haven't. You can also see the input records, what files were delivered. Optionally the output records, but in this case, since the task is still running, there will be no output records. So we are going right to the email. You have a complete traceability of who was notified of which task at what point. You could again click here on the open mail and get the same view as we had a couple of screenshots ago. If you are, for instance, an administrator, you also have the ability to view all workflows. And so not just the ones from your department or from your role, or that in which you have to perform a task, but all workflows. And in that case, you might also have be allowed to export workflows. But before going to export workflows, first let's have a look at the details of a workflow. You can have the general details and workflow individual tasks, but this history overview is very useful because you can see who at what point uploaded or delivered or did anything in the workflow. So for instance, here is Peter at the start of the workflow delivered this PNG, and then there was a flyer created. So here at this point, Bill uploaded this particular document, this design, into the workflow. And you can see that in that task, he had also access to that delivered file from the previous person. You can see here that in the approval task called approve flyer, that it was rejected by Martin, and that in a task called correction flyer, a new version of that file was uploaded by Bill again. And finally, in this task, you can see that the flyer was approved by Martin, and the task is completed and approved. So here's a task by task view, and then you also here have the ability to have a summary, just the list of files in the workflow and what happened with them, if they were provided, if they were approved. So a complete overview of the files. At the bottom you can see that you have the ability to reassign a role in a task. You can restart the complete workflow, you can stop the workflow, you can restart the stopped workflow, you can delete the complete workflow. So you can manage your workflows completely from inside. And again, this is linked to permissions inside your Cumulus roles or users. As I mentioned before, you can export the workflows, which means that if you click on it, it will export the current selection to an Excel. In the past, you could do that to tab limited text. Now it provides you with the possibility to do that to Excel. Very important to know is that we improved the documentation and created a training document with exercises and which give you the opportunity to completely learn to work with and configure Workflow Manager. We integrated 20 training movies, so with these movies you see exactly what to do. These training movies are available with a link from inside this from inside this training document, but they are also available from this link. So if you want access, you will see that in this folder there are in a Dropbox more than 50 movies available, 25 about Workflow Manager and about 25 about RoboFlow. Don't forget that Workflow Manager is also integrated with vProof. vProof is a high-end proofing tool that allows you to compare versions, to zoom in, to make annotations on the picture, and all these things are then automatically saved, and the comments and approvals are automatically written back to your workflow task, giving you complete control over your assets in Cumulus, but giving you a high-end proofing tool inside vProof. vProof also allows proofing, for instance, of movies, where you can annotate on different frames of a movie. Talking about movies, inside sites, we also give the customer the ability to use VideoStream, which is a simple streaming solution for all your different movie video formats. You are able to preview them with the flash preview. Behind the scenes, the video stream creates a flash movie for the original, and it's that one that can be seen, can be previewed, which with the flash integration of sites gives you the streaming facilities of flash inside sites. PrestoBridge is something that is integrated in the Cumulus client and allows you to archive to a tape library or an offline and other storage that is controlled by Prestor, and you can archive, and it will talk to PrestoBridge to move it to Prestor, or you can restore it, getting it back into your environment. And finally, TypeTracks is a product with which you can manage easily your InDesign projects using the interaction of FontAgent Pro to get the information of the linked images, the used fonts, etc., etc., inside your InDesign project. And in a couple of months' time, you will see that we will have a new version of TypeTracks, a TypeTracks server, which will allow us to perform these tasks server-side, so it can give the user an even better experience to work with. This was Workflow Manager webinar 2014. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to mail us or to contact us. You can find all the information on our website. Thank you for joining.